All right. About 2 minutes past. I think we can probably get started. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. This session, assuming that you joined the correct one, is about parent training and caregiver engagement. We have a new product that we'd like to showcase and demo to you all that we're really, really excited about, that I think is going to really move the needle on, bringing the caregiver more into the loop of care, which will improve outcomes and also improve the utilization of authorized hours for clients. So just to jump right in, because we've got a pretty stacked agenda. Just quickly to introduce myself, and then I'll pass it to Dr. Tim Fuller. My name's Zach. I'm the Director of Product Management, focused mainly on clinical products, including CareCoordinator and assessments. Now with AI, getting more involved on that side of things and infusing intelligence across our product portfolio. I'll pass it over to Tim.
Hello, my name is Tim Fuller. I'm a content strategist here at Central Reach. I had the great honor and pleasure to work along this project, although not the primary content developer. That's Kristen Smith, who's joining us and will be helping man the Q&A side of things along with some others. But I'm really honored to be here along with Zach to kind of share with you guys what's possible out of this platform in service to parents and their families.
So quick agenda. So we're going to start with some background, just an overview of, why we launched this product, why we decided to continue investing in the product, making it better, building the features that we're about to demo for you, then get a little bit more in depth about the value of the features that we built, specifically what those features are, and then what research we have that kind of backs up our rationale as to why we prioritize the features that we have. After that, we'll go into a demo where Tim is actually going to play the role of a therapist, and I'll play the role of a caregiver, and we'll kind of show you what it could be like to use this application in practice, give a little bit of anecdotal information about how it could be used. Obviously, there are many more ways that it could be used than we'll be able to demo, but we're hoping that this will, be a good start that can kind of get your thinking going on how this can be useful to you in your practice. After that, we'll jump into a live Q&A, answer any questions that you might have, and then hopefully this is not the end. So if you are interested in learning more about this, we'd love to schedule further sessions with you to go in more depth on things. So just to get started on the background, so this is a graphic that I like to show a lot, just because I think it centers around particularly the clinical workflow and the users of our products and the people involved in your practice. So obviously the clinician is, working very hard to design, work on instructional design for the learner. But the technician is, in a lot of cases, the one who's actually delivering care on a day-to-day in the sessions. So there needs to be a tight coordination between those groups. Unfortunately, we've found that often what gets left behind or is kind of a challenge to pull into this is the caregiver and the family, which, if you think about it, and we'll get more into the specifics of the research, but the caregiver spends the most time with the learner out of anybody in their life. So, if you're not in sync with what the caregiver is doing and they're not in sync and understanding what's happening in the session, this can cause problems for outcomes. And ultimately, because insurance companies are aware of this, this can also be something that is reimbursable if you're able to engage them, get them in for parent training sessions, and keep them up to speed. So just to kind of run through this, really what the product is designed to do is to kind of fill this gap, connect the pieces between the caregiver and the care team within the practice, to make sure that everybody's moving forward in harmony. And what this can do is, really center things around the learner so that anybody who's engaging with them in their life is focused on, helping them with their independence. To get a little bit more specific on the problems that we're solving here. So we want to increase the utilization of authorized parent training billable hours. So there are billing codes that are available to you. Some of you may be utilizing this very well. Others may be struggling a little bit to figure out, how does this fit? How can we focus on this without adding another to-do list to your staff? We're hoping that this product is something that, is really going to help make that a lot easier for you. Second is engaging prospects on your wait list. So we know that, given the kind of supply and demand of expertise within the industry, you may not be able to get all of the clients that you want to in your practice right away. So you may have a wait list where, there are parents that are waiting for services, they really need some help, but you don't really have the capacity yet to get started with the care right away. In those cases, we have content out of the box, super easy to get started with, that you can hand to that parent. Also, data collection tools that they can start journaling with, sharing information that can get you started in the intake process. They can make it a lot easier to, bring them into the fold earlier on. And then the third, obviously, is kind of an overarching value, which is just improving outcomes overall. So as you bring the parent closer to treatment, that's going to improve the velocity of the skills that a child's going to be able to learn. Pass it off to Tim real quick.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on what we think about an engagement, and you can define engagement, and we do in a number of different ways, but broadly speaking, engagement is participation. And participation isn't just attending a meeting, but it's really a meaningful and deep in scope participation in your child's therapy. So when we think about engagement and we think about that care team and that coordination among the care team, having parents participate yields really powerful results. I deliberately chose these four, but also supporting literature that comes outside of behavior analysis specifically, which is not to discount the work that has been done within our own discipline, but also to acknowledge that this question of what does engagement mean spans a broad reach inside of psychology. And these are just, kind of cherry picked, but I think that they give a broad sort of rationale for why having a parent be really deeply and powerfully involved in their child's care is beyond just a good insight, or kind of said more colloquially, sort of like a duh kind of moment. Of course, having parents be engaged with their child's well-being, development, and care or therapy is a good idea, but it comes with powerful outcomes. And probably primary to that is just the enhanced relationship between parent and child. Now, not only is that parent and child relationship a challenge under some circumstances, depending on the diagnosis of the learner or the child, but we have good understanding that that relationship is key. And that's not despite the challenges, but that's with those challenges. And also just having a really important advocate inside that therapeutic and care team that's going to help with generalization and just better treatment outcomes, because we get that consistency. We have another teammate on our care team that's really involved. And some families are really up to that task, and other families need more support. And that's really what we're designed here to do, is to meet the demands of any kind of family. Some families are going to come into this, and they're really those kind of golden families that are just already sort of prepared to meet the demands that you're going to place with inside of that family dynamic. But there's also a lot of variability inside of that. And so we want to make sure that we build something that kind of meet the demands for you in the varied interactions that you may have with different families. So you're going to get an opportunity to kind of enhance that generalization and skills, leading to better outcomes. This is no small point, but the parent stress, there is good data behind this. This is just a cherry-picked one from Estison that's got about 10 years, but well-cited, well-replicated under a various degrees of parent stress indicators. And then lastly, which I think is really important, is this clear conduit to cultural sensitivity, something that I am very encouraged to see more emphasis inside of our own discipline in. But they know that incorporating the parents in a really meaningful way helps us as providers make sure that the content that we're bringing is culturally sensitive to what they value as a family. And that can be a challenge sometimes when we don't have as much engagement. And so knowing that when we bring the family in a deep and meaningful way, we see something that makes it easier for us to meet the values of the family when it comes to cultural sensitivity.
Thanks, Tim. And then to kind of, hammer home some of those points, and particularly I think on the, Tim mentioned the parent stress. And this slide is kind of intended to, and I won't go point by point, but illustrate some of the struggles that your staff and the parents that are involved or maybe less involved have on a day-to-day that this could be helping with. Ultimately, it's very difficult to achieve the levels of engagement that improve all of those vectors that Tim was mentioning. But we do believe that this product is a great step in that direction to kind of help close that gap. So now without further ado, so we've talked a lot about the problem, and you're probably wondering, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? And what we're going to do about it is we have a product called CareCoordinator, and we're launching a new kind of sub application that's tied to CareCoordinator called CareCompanion. And the reason why we have two different brands here is we want CareCompanion to really be the parent's home base that you can provide as your practice to them. Ultimately, you are, using Central Reach, and you're using CareCoordinator. These are now going to be under the same umbrella with SSO, so you can sign in with your same login credentials. We want to make it very, very easy for you to get started and manage things so that it fits within your workflow. But for parents, we kind of figured that this would be something that you could market as a benefit to your practice and maybe even a unique differentiator that, you can offer this additional value outside of, the scope of what's happening within the parent training practices and what's happening within the sessions. So to get a little bit more specific about what's included in these products, on the CareCoordinator side, for you and your staff, we have brand new web and mobile applications. I've mentioned single sign-on makes it really easy to get started. You don't have to juggle multiple logins, which is quite irritating if you have to do that. You're able to view and comment on caregiver journal entries, which we'll get more into on that feature of journaling. We've also expanded the content and lesson management. So it makes it really easy to assign content, but you also can do it without assigning as well. So we've now made the lesson library self-serve so that if you are a parent, you can just kind of in passing mention, hey, go look for this lesson within your library, but you don't need to be as hands-on if you don't have the time to assign within the platform. So we'll demo that a little bit later. We also allow for data collection within the session. So in our mobile application for staff, you can look at rubrics to collect data either on the lesson level or even agnostic to the lesson, just kind of aligning that a little bit closer to the parent goals and seeing, what progress are they making session to session. On the caregiver side, so they have this new application, brand new brand as well to it. We think it's very well designed, very easy to use. This app experience includes the ability to do journal entries, either with structured check-ins, suggestions built in to get started really quickly and answer questions that may be relevant and helpful to you, but also to them, and also create journal entries that are, kind of more of a blank slate. They could take pictures, they could add media, they could share that with you, they could update you, if new medications have been prescribed or changes have happened. And, we'll get more into all this later, but we're very, very excited about these features. And, this is just kind of a sneak peek. And again, we'll get into the application later. So I'll kind of push past that. Then I'll pass it back to Tim to kind of explain a little bit on why we decided that journaling was so important.
Yeah, that's this was something that was really really something that we thought was an important first step. There's a lot of different ways to have the parents have some permanent product, some response effort when they're going through content. And we'll talk about content here in a second. But to highlight journaling and why start there? Well, one thing is that oftentimes the people that we primarily work with inside of a behavior analytic context, well, journaling is a great outcome. We'd love for the kids, adolescents, and adults that we work with to get to the journaling phase. But this is a great starting place with families. And there is a tremendous, and we'll go to the next slide in just a moment to kind of say that there's a lot of support in terms of what journaling can do. I like to break it up into these three general categories. What's it going to do for me? What can it do for my partnership? If you know, within my care team, and within, if we have a partnership in the home, and then what can be done for the child in this regard. And so what's better for them? I mean, who doesn't want better sleep and stress reduction? That sounds really nice. That's not just a good insight. There's a lot of literature support that does that engaging in journaling and that kind of introspective, not just thinking, but deliberately writing down that experience can lead to those. That's a nice thing, and something that I think a lot of parents would say, yeah, I'd like a little bit of that. But also things like better emotional processing. And that doesn't take a lot of translation for a behavior analyst to see what would be there for that. When you're reactive and highly reactive in an emotional position, that's a difficult time to make strong decisions that may be in the betterment and service to your child in that regard. And so having just a little bit of distance between you and how close you might feel to your emotions can be a really helpful and really powerful thing to do for parents, to give them more empowerment to make choices that are both in service to themselves, to the family dynamic as a whole, and ultimately to the child. That goes in nicely with that problem solving enhancement. And there's some really cool research behind that. I won't go into it right now, but really, really cool analogs of how they've measured parents' problem solving with regard to that. And then also an improved belief about their parenting abilities. Depending on the families, and there's just, however many families there are, that's how much diversity there is in families. But it's a really vulnerable thing at times to be in a therapeutic context. And I don't mean therapeutic in the clinical sense necessarily, but the therapeutic sense in the medical necessity that we provide for their children. And that's, it's equally as powerful in that regard. And sometimes parents can have pretty profound doubts about how they're doing as a parent. But engaging in journaling, and when that's incorporated in a more family dynamic approach to parent support and training, we do see improvements in their own self-evaluation of how they're doing as a parent. And that can be a really, really helpful thing to keep them engaged, to keep them open to the idea of what's possible next as you kind of layer in what you're asking of them. Now, in a family with a partnership inside of there, we're going to get better communication. That's really well validated in the literature support. I don't know what partnership, whether they have a child with disabilities or not, wouldn't want better communication. So note to all of us, maybe a little bit of journaling could be good there. Good self-awareness of coping strategies. So you're going to see better acknowledgement from partnership to partner in terms of acknowledging their role in maybe a disciplinary situation. And that ties in nicely with the distribution of responsibilities. For those families that do have multiple parents in the home, making sure that we've got good communication, that we feel like we have an equitable, doesn't always mean fair, but equitable distribution of responsibility that's wrapped around good communication, we're going to see improved outcomes for their child. And then really, that kind of tugs on my heartstring a little bit too. When I move over to the furthest right-hand column and what's it going to do for their child, this first one, stress reduction, that's not stress reduction just for the family, for the person journaling. That's measures on stress indexes for the child, that we see that they're experiencing less elevated emotional reactivity, less stress inside of that. And I think that can be a really powerful thing. Let's not make too small a point about the effects that therapeutic interventions have on the child themselves. We ask a lot of the kids that we work with, kids, adolescents, adults. This being a parenting situation, we're probably kind of contextualize more in the kid situation. But to know that me sitting down, reflecting, having these benefits to me also leads to a stress reduction in my child, that's a powerful, powerful win, and a nice thing to be able to enroll a parent who might be reluctant in engaging in a journaling kind of response, that they can see that this isn't just hokey. This is going to lead to really important outcomes in that regard. And then, as I've kind of mentioned, there's good literature support. We'll flash the next slide. So these aren't just insights. These are just a sample of some of the things in here deliberately taken outside of behavior analytic journals, specifically because journaling has been really heavily researched by our sociological counterparts. And And if for whatever reason you're interested in this, please do reach out. I would be more than happy to provide a more expansive list. And we're going to make that available on CareCoordinator too, so that you guys have an opportunity to kind of leverage that if that is value to you.
And thanks, Tim. And now for the kind of next part of this, which is, I think a pretty hard-hitting feature. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to develop a good library of content to deploy for parents to kind of consume. There's a lot of content on the internet, and that's a good thing. Tim and I were just talking yesterday about the power of the existence of things like WebMD and the ability to, quickly access, medical information or, recommendations from other parents or other, clinicians online. But there's also a lot of information out there that may not be very helpful and in fact may be harmful. And so the ability to kind of have a curated and trusted and validated research library of content at your fingertips, day one, get started in minutes and be able to deploy that, we think is very, very powerful. And we found that from customers that have used this as well. But beyond that, we also allow you to bring your own content. So if you do already have a library that you like and you don't want to, for whatever reason, use some of our content, you may want to take some of it, you may want to use only yours. We support that as well. So you can create content, blanket across your organization, kind of welcome to my practice type things, or additional training resources, or even specific things for a specific learner, completely tailored to their experience. Obviously that takes, more time, more effort, so we can kind of support any level of, time and effort based on your bandwidth.
And to kind of talk about the development standards for content, I would be remiss if I did not highlight the chief content developer for this, which was Kristen Smith, a real master when it comes to instructional design, and really took it in these kind of 4 important categories of development standards, so that you can feel confident that if you assign a pre-made lesson, that that this lesson is not just this isn't just insights, these aren't just good ideas, but really come with a very intentional approach to developing this that's resting on an incredible foundation of an instructional design. So I think that when we think about incorporating content that's been developed outside of the organization, you can have confidence that when you bring this in, you assign this to the family, that this is expertly designed by a team of designers, bringing their own expertise and experience. We'll start in the practical and flexible. We're talking about complex issues, but we need to talk about them in a way that can resonate with a family that does not have or may have a wide array of technical sophistication. I don't need them to be behavior analysts, said simply, but I do need them to have some orientation to what it looks like to have their child in the care of a behavior analyst as part of their care team. And so you're going to see a real reduction in jargon, which I think is such an important thing when communicating to parents. And these have all been vetted to make sure that it not only maintains the rigor of the behavior analytic foundation that it rests on, but it's appropriate for that audience. And so we wanted to make sure, and we'll talk a little bit about the distribution of that in terms of what kind of things can you assign to families in terms of the categories that are already there and ever growing. But it's practical. It fits within the schedule. I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit on this, but if you go to the 3rd column, moving over to the right-hand side, it's accessible. It's on your phone. It's right here. And so a really great question came up in the Q&A. I won't be able to answer all of it, but I do want to acknowledge it about the difficulty we can have in requesting something of a family, and even the struggles that we may have to ask them to take some anecdotal data to support an insight or something like that. But asking of our families can be challenging, and it may take a runway of rapport to be built up so that you can build some trust in asking even more of them. And so I don't want to discount the challenges there, but making something more accessible, that can fit within the busy schedules of a family. And you're right, we can all look at who it may not work for. But as I can attest, you can make this work with families. We would have to talk about that into another context. But being flexible, being dynamic in what it can approach and kind of fitting within the palm of your hand really does kind of at least remove one excuse. I'm not suggesting that those excuses are not meaningful or real, but at least it makes it perhaps more probable. The other thing, in moving over to the systematic and values dynamic, this is something really important to Kristen and myself, among others that assisted in the development of this content. So we wanted to take a contemporary approach that acknowledged the systems dynamic that a family is, and what we know and have garnered from the research inside and outside of behavior analysis. When we think of a family as a system, we can make much more powerful impacts when we incorporate their engagement. And then as a personal point of background and expertise is really bringing in that values component. Coming from an acceptance and commitment therapy background, this is something that, borrowing from our clinical colleagues, when I incorporated this in my own parent training, a massive shift occurred in what not only building rapport with the family and trust, which is so important, but also helping families deal with harder situations. And you can already trust that that's right there, pre-populated on the platform, that you can start to assign. And you can also assign to staff as well that might be interested in this, that it may have not had the opportunity to really get that in their own formal training. And so despite a lot of this being geared towards family, this can also be helpful to perhaps a clinician earlier in their experience in that regard. And then lastly, moving over to the grounded in research and experience, when you look at the team of people led by Kristen in developing this, you've got decades worth of experience, and the benefit, maybe, speaking a little bit more just me and you, is that you don't have to deal with the stuff that I didn't do well. You only get to benefit from the time of the lessons that we've learned after the mistakes being made inside of that. And so that's a really valuable thing, and something that I'm really honored to be a part of, is that I get to bring the best of what I've learned in my over 15 years of working with families to bear with a larger group of people in that regard. And then, Zach, if you move to the next slide, we'll just kind of take a look at the distribution of that content in terms of, how much you have in terms of breadth. What is there in terms of the lessons you have. You've got over 200, I think right now on platform it's about 150, but the platform and then the development side of things, it's ever growing and in a good distribution of things. And as a point of something that I really value working here at Central Reach, is that when we get really committed organizations that want to try a new product like this, we listen to you. So if there's a category of content that you would really like to see built out, we listen and we make sure that we allocate those efforts to meet the demands there. So as you start to work with the platform, you're like, man, I really love the advocacy component. And we just know it's very challenging to find the time to really develop your own content, although the platform fully supports that. We want to make sure that you can do that. And then on the next feature of this, Zach, you can kind of see where we distribute that content by category. So you have values, you've got basic parent training, you've got parenting 101, that advocacy I talked about, and then the all-important ABA strategies. Instead of having to repeat yourself many times, you can also have that something assigned to the family so that they can revisit it. It really takes, it kind of takes the opportunity of, the family's going to have access to this library. They can peruse it, what you make available to them. You can directly assign, of course, but it really puts in the power of the parents' hands some of the things that they may have had questions about. And again, as Zach mentioned, you go online, and the internet is a powerful place, and I do not want to discount its power. But there's a lot of information out there, some of it incredibly valuable, incredibly insightful, spot on with what we would probably recommend, but not all the time. And now we have a trusted and vetted content library that you can feel would work well within your organization, work in alignment with your background and expertise. And so we wanted to make sure that that was in the palm of the hands for the family. Is it demo time, Zach? Do I get to? But no, it is. Okay. It is CareCore therapy. Welcome. So this is. I'm signed in from the staff perspective. This is what I would do if I was signing into CareCoordinator. We're going to start right here on the information page. I have a little bit of dashboarding here to kind of keep me there. Now, if I look at my people, the people that I'm directly linked to, I'm running a lean ship. All right, I've got one caregiver that I'm in coordination with, it is Zach, who you can see on the screen. And if I go to Zach, I have some really nice things I can see. I can see obviously some administrative information. I can see what lessons are currently assigned to them. Do we have any journal entries that I need to review or acknowledge? We've got data and then associations. He's associated with me. Again, a lean ship. But you could imagine in a more dynamic therapeutic organization, there's probably going to be several different assignees. Maybe you have a dedicated parent trainer or something that works across a number of families in coordination with probably a primary BCBA or something like that, meaning it's flexible. You can assign and have different associations. But let's talk about lessons. So Zach doesn't have any lessons and I want to assign him some. And let's also have just some basic preconditions that Zach and I have good rapport. I've already gone through an interview process. We've kind of we've built some trust, but it's not, we're still early days yet. Now I have, I've worked with a lot of families. Maybe I have a really specific way of wanting to start my parent training or something like that. Well, if I have a really specific way of doing that, and I like to bring in values, I'm going to search, and I've got my whole content library. And you know what? Actually, let's do a better thing. Let's just browse that. Let's look at one visually. It's really, really helpful on the left-hand side. I can see all of those various categories. I can jump right to categories. Not that one, Tim. Don't press that button. That's not what I should have pressed. But it's all really well organized there. I can also come back here. Again, I want to do something specific. I can see 2 pre-populated modules that's going to somewhat coalesce around this idea of values. So I'm going to open up module number 7, and I've got 2. These are perfect. This is exactly what I'd like to assign to Zach. So I'm just going to drag this right over inside of, just going to give it a moment. It's there. I can go back over to Zach. I can see now that he's got, I probably need to refresh in that regard.
You actually, so go back to the.
Oh, I need to assign.
Yeah.
I see what I did is I pulled it into my view, things that I wanted to work on, but I didn't assign it to anybody. So good thing that not only do I run a small ship, but also the person I'm working with helped develop this application, and that's really helpful in that regard. So I'm going to assign to my caregiver. I'm going to give this to Zach. We're going to do that. What this also models too is what you can see inside the modules. I can do individual lessons, but you can see that Kristen has curated really, really great modules that, let's say, maybe I don't have a really specific way I want to do this, but I want to kind of coalesce around certain ideas. Well, those are already kind of pre-populated for you so that you can assign a full module that's going to give you a really good scope of lessons based on a number of different kind of parameters and things like that. We could also look at understanding autism. Maybe that's a good starting place for a family you're working with. And so that's already been expertly curated by Kristen inside of that. But let's go here. We're good. I can go back up to Zach. Let's say he's, I've already been in good communication with him. I let him know that he's going to have these lessons. And then on his view, which I will pause. Oh, maybe before I do, maybe I want to create something really specific for Zach. I can do that right over here by hitting this plus button. So I can create a lesson or even a full module for Zach. Now I can do this at the organization level, or I can do something specific for this individual caregiver. And think about the power of this. Maybe you've got some policies and procedures that you want to pass along to the family to kind of get them a jump start into starting their work with you in the organization. Well, you can build that out right here in the app, and you can assign that to families so that even outside of kind of a parent training side of things, you can also distribute organization-specific content that can help get a jump start and really close the gap. Again, something they can revisit, something that if they have questions about, it's something that is going to live there and doesn't always have to require you as the primary source material for that. But okay, I'll stop yapping, and now we'll kind of move over to what.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Apologies. So right now I'm taking on the role of a parent. I've just met with Tim. We had a really great parent training session. We talked about goals. We talked about values. He mentioned at the end of it, he's going to assign me some content and recommended for me to check it out within my CareCompanion mobile app. So I downloaded that app. I've set it up. You'll see I do have on this home screen continuing lessons, and if I were to come in fresh, that would not show any continuing lessons. I was kind of playing around with this in preparation, so I did, open a couple lessons there. But you can see on here, there's the ability to look at my lessons and look at my journal entries. And you see in the top right-hand corner, the ability to see notifications as well. So if I open this up, I can see that a new module was assigned to me. This is the module that Tim just selected. So values, consent, neurodiversity. If I want, I can just jump straight to that. So if I tap on that, it'll open up that module. But let's say I don't want to do that right now, so I'll leave from there. If I want to go to that lesson, I can open up the lessons tab. And within here, this is broken into my to-dos, the ability to browse, and then see what I've completed. So if I want to start that module right from here, I can tap on that. If I don't, I can go into the Browse tab, and I'll be able to see all of those sections that were in that admin panel that Tim was showing. So I can kind of just quickly grab whatever I need. If I've been told, focus on values, I can look at what was assigned, but I can also go beyond that if I want to. I'm not required to, but it's available for me. Going back to the to-do, just to show what it's like to kind of open up these lessons. If you have assigned a module, these modules have lessons within them. So it's kind of like a folder with lessons inside. So I'll click on the first one.
This lesson is going to introduce you to the concept of assent.
So without going into, showing the entire lesson, I'll just kind of skip through that quickly just to show.
Informed consent, which is ethically.
The types of media that we support within here, you can do audio, which is this, audio with an image. You can also do video, you can do text. There's a lot of different multimedia that's supported within here. If I leave from here and go back, you can see assent has been started, so that's in progress. So if I come back later, let's say that I'm dropping off my kids at school, and I figured I'd had a moment to just look at my application, but now I've got to drive back home, and I only had a minute to start, and I want to pick back up later. We've earmarked that section, so you can see I haven't completed very much of this module, but I can see my progress. And if I go back in there later, I can see I was working on assent. If I open that up, it goes directly to my last step within the lesson. So we've chunked these out very discreetly so that you don't end up, with a 10-minute long video or, any heavy content that feels like a burden, which, I may not even want to start because I may not have that much time on my hands. So to kind of go back, one of the things actually, maybe this is a better way of showing it, how journaling can kind of be tied to lessons. So there are 16 steps, so it'll take me a little bit in this call to get to the end. But if I do, it now prompts me to start a journal entry based on what I learned. This is not required. I can still, leave and come back later. I can see what the next lesson in the module is and quickly jump to that. But if I'd like to start a journal entry, I can tap on this and I can say, learned a lot, and any other notes that I may have. And what's also interesting is I can add media to this. So if I want to take a picture, this could be, I want to share a, milestone with my child. I've in the context of assent, it may be difficult for me to come up with an example, but if it was based on, problem behavior or maybe a new skill that's emerging, I could take a picture of, my child tying their shoes and say, yes, they kind of hit that skill and that milestone. I can share this with Tim so that on his side, he can see what I've just done and see that I've completed this. He can comment on this and we can talk back and forth about it and have a dialogue. If I leave here, I'll return to lessons. If I open up the journal section, so one of the things that we really wanted to do, and to kind of speak to one of the questions that was in the Q&A section, obviously for parents, and this is what we kind of led with in the slide deck, they don't have a lot of time available. So our goal is not to add another to-do list to your staff, not to add another to-do list item for parents. So they can really take this as far as they would like. If they have 10 minutes on their hands, they could fill the 10 minutes with the application. But if they also only have 30 seconds, they can also just use this app for those 30 seconds. And the way that we've supported this is you can create blank journal entries. You can also pick up from a curated list of journaling suggestions that kind of jogs your thinking and helps you get started really quickly. We also have a highly structured daily check-in. So this is very short form, multiple choice questions. You can quickly go through and just answer, everyone's doing great. Reflecting on your day. Did you have a favorite moment? Yes, I did. I'm feeling motivated. And I felt very connected. And if I'd like to give more context, I can. I don't need to. But if I'd like to, explain what that special moment was, I can share that. And I'll go ahead and share this with Tim as well. And with that, I'll pass it back to Tim. But right before I do, I also want to mention that this is just the start with the application. So as Tim mentioned earlier, we've prioritized journaling and lessons, but we're also aware that there are many other things that you may want to deploy within this application. For example, scheduling. It'd be great for a client to be able to see their upcoming appointments and kind of tie these lessons to some timeline of when they will be meeting with you for parent training. So we do have that in mind as well.
The idea of a daily check-in, excuse me, one, longitudinally tracking that over time can provide you some insights from a clinical perspective, but also two, on the day of or the day before, a meeting or something with the parents, that face-to-face time that you have with them. Goodness gracious, is it helpful to kind of know what you might be walking when? Is there correspondence between what they're doing in their daily check-ins and then that individual face-to-face times meeting? Like, are we seeing continuity between those? Are we not? These are just another touch point to be able to kind of see and keep you in the loop of what's going on for that family. And I think I'm sharing my screen, right? Okay, great. You can see here, I've got a little notification. I was just kind of perusing some lessons. I was thinking about one of the comments in there about how challenging it can be in terms of having a family collect data. And I was just kind of saying, okay, well, what if I just typed in data? And so this was what I was thinking. It's like, oh, well, maybe I'll assign that to Zach as something to kind of reinforce the idea of how critical it is from a behavior analytic perspective, and then just start a conversation about what that could look like and what might not be available for the family in this moment. But that's what I was doing before I noticed this this little icon. I don't always know what to call them. There's really cool UX and UI designers as part of this team that have such cool stuff. So I can access it there. I can come over here to Zach's profile page. I can see I've got a little icon here letting me know that there's some journal things going on. I'm going to do a check-in. I can see, okay, great. I can leave a quick comment if I'd like to. Gosh, I really want to see how they, sort of what their approach was to Ascent. They shared something with me. I got a picture. So that's really cool. They learned a lot, which, may in this case, it's sort of, just to showcase the functionality. But let's say, for example, that's what a family wrote. I mean, there was a really great point in there of like, families just don't have a lot of time. Maybe they're new to journaling. Maybe they're a little reluctant to this. They don't know what to say. Well, all right, great. I can comment. I can leave a comment and say, tell me 2 takeaways that were really meaningful to you, or how could you see this in a specific scenario with your child, and is there something you see as different? How, there's a number of different ways depending on my relationship with that family about how I might take a comment like this. And obviously this is just to demonstrate the functionality, but I might say something like, Zach, I really appreciate you sending me a picture. Not sure what this is, buddy. Don't know. As just sort of a playful sort of example. But you could imagine a family that's really engaged with this, sending you a picture of what they did on Saturday. and just, maybe the child is at a playground and for the first time they're interacting with a kid near the slides or something like that. I don't know about you guys, but when I have opportunities to see that from the family in a safe and secure way, right? Like they're not sending it to, my phone or something like that. I think that's a really cool advancement right there.
All right, thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we can move into the Q&A, but real quick, there are a couple questions that I see asked that I just want to answer now. So one of them is, when will this be available to use? And the good news is it's available right now. Just reach out to us. It's live on all fronts. Everything that we've demoed today is available in production. So if you were to look on the App Store, you'll see both apps. We have a mobile app for the caregivers, which is what I demoed. We also have a mobile app for staff, which we didn't, have the time to demo, but that's available today as well. And the web application is also available today with all features that we've mentioned. The second question that I see, and there are actually two of them that are kind of similar, asking about Avail. And so to just quickly address that, Avail was a product and is a product that was designed primarily for adult transition and employment services, although it does have a lot of features and functions that can be useful in a lot of different areas. And initially, when we launched this product, we launched it on the Avail platform because we thought that it was as close as we could get to, what we wanted to deliver for CareCoordinator. However, with the customers that, had launched with that product, there were things that they loved about it. They loved the content, and there were aspects of the design that they really liked. But we felt like there needed to be a lot more specific investment in the parent training workflows that would ultimately diverge from the workflows that were necessary for that adult transition use case. And so that's why we decided to launch a new product for CareCoordinator. Any customers who have been using Avail for CareCoordinator, we've migrated those accounts over into the new. So if you have questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to work with you to make sure that we've kind of done the proper training and assistance to use the new platform.
Just to touch on a couple of other questions that I have seen too, many of them have been answered really well. And just to add to a couple, Brittany had asked something about the goals inside of there, and Kristen mentioned, they're not in there yet, but there's also a webinar that Kristen and I did several months ago around parent training goals. And so there's other resources beyond just what we have here to really kind of answer some of those types of questions. And so it's a really great question, such an important aspect to, kind of articulating what you're going to do clinically inside of a parent training aspect. And in addition to that, that all important CPT code, your 156 code, how does that work? Kristen answered that absolutely perfect as that kind of supplement to this face-to-face time. And I think about, and it is an empirical question, one we're looking at very closely, but also one for your own organization, is that when you have something like this that supplements and supports those interactive elements, do we have better continuity? Do we have better organization? Do we have better systemization inside of our organization? When I think about kind of managing a large scale organization, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to have cohesion from that organizational point of view of this is the way we approach parent training. And by having something like this, it can unite and coordinate the efforts like that. And you can really leverage the internal expertise to kind of help other members of your organization that may not have had that expertise and experience. And so you're no longer bound kind of geographically for a number of reasons. This is just one more opportunity for organizations to, kind of bring in, if that is of a value to you, it would be of mine, a more coordinated approach to parent training. Really great questions in here too. I know I'm probably missing some of these too, but if you look.
Yeah, another question that I see from Maria is the content library shown available to anyone with an account? And the answer is yes. If you have a subscription in an account, you can access that full library that Tim showed and make that available to your parents and to your staff. Another one from Deborah. Are we able to connect extended family, grandparents, for example, or additional providers? And the answer to that is also yes. We have no limit on the amount of caregivers that you're able to add within the system. So we can support additional caregivers being added. Logan has asked, how does this integrate with CR Enterprise? What data is shared between the two apps? And for this question, I have kind of two answers. One is we've made the first step towards the integration, which I would say is the integration with our single sign-on service. For anybody that's used CR assessments, you may be familiar with kind of our process of integrating our applications together, and we're going to be doing a similar thing here. Our goal is by the end of the year, we're going to be building in additional integrations to be able to support more data flowing between the applications. So right now, the primary immediate goal was get the sign-ons and the identity service synced up. The next step would be, things like scheduling or, billing. And what I would love to do is if anybody on this call is interested in working with us through that to prioritize which integrations and what data is most important, I'd love to work with you on that so that we can make sure that the most important, hardest hitting features are being developed there, because that will be our next step and the biggest priority for us in the near term.
As we're kind of coming up on time. As we're kind of coming up on time, again, as Zach mentioned at the opening, if you're even just intrigued, like, I wonder how this might work really specifically for you or your organization, please reach out. We'd love to kind of connect with you and kind of show exactly how this could be integrated, especially if you have a really strong sense of what you'd like to see happen with your parent training efforts. That way we can really kind of tailor that conversation to what that looks like for your organization. And then if you want to learn more, I know we're not, Zach, if you want to show the CR Unite slide. I know that, there's a lot of really great events at CR Unite. Really encourage you guys to come and join us. Kristen and myself are going to be talking about CareCoordinator, CareCompanion. And so we'd love to not only share that from that perspective, but also meet and talk about this in more depth in this kind of setting. Despite also being able to meet and talk in other settings as well. But we'd love to see you there.